Welcome DMs and Dominatrix alike to S&M D&D TLDR GM Edition, where we talk about getting your groove on in Session 0. Before we get into the thick meat of this video, I think it's important with any D&D session to remember that the DM is given power by the players. As a DM, you must be understanding and work with your players in order to give them a great experience. You might even want a safe word to know that your players, are feeling safe. Basically, it's not just about you, you selfish dick. I had my first D&D Session 0 within the last year. I think it went pretty well, and I think I came with the conclusion that Session 0 is really made up of 3 different things. 1. Getting a brief history of the world, which no one will probably read. 2. Understanding allowable rules. And 3. Creating a character. You might also be able to include getting them at their starting location, but let's not rush the gun too much here. If you have new players, you don't want to rush into things too quickly. You want to warm them up, maybe get them in the mood. If you move too fast, they're going to leave you quicker than your last date you went on did. But before we get started at those 3 things, there is something you need to do as a DM. You need to do some pre-buying and pre-planning before a Session 0 even starts. As a DM, you don't want to be having an intense group session with nothing prepared. Here are the basic things that I think you need to acquire in order to get into the craft. 1. Dungeon Master's Guide. 2. Monster Manual. 3. Player's Handbook. I think there are many other things you can buy in order to enhance the experience, such as miniatures, tiles, battle mats. But me and my friends have had a wonderful, lustrous experience with none of those things. What I will say is if you can't afford these things, there is a free open starter set that you can get for the basic rules for Dungeons & Dragons. You could find dice rollers online. Hypothetically speaking, you could play this game spending $0 if you wanted to, but it's going to be a very limited amount of information out there. Now on to the first thing you should cover in your Session 0 with your players, the history of the world. Just an FYI, this isn't a Tinder date. You can't just get a match and expect to score without thinking. There are some questions that you need to briefly think of in order to fully understand your world so that way you can also give this information to the players. And I mean briefly. 1. What continent is your world? Are you using something pre-made such as Faerun or Greyhawk? Or are you scrapping that shit so you can bullshit your way through making an awesome campaign that they will remember for the rest of their lives? 2. How are races generally treated? This really goes more into the stereotypes of the different races and how they are looked at in relation to each other. In my world, I made dwarf slavers, so a lot of the races kind of look at dwarves in general as being bad people, even though they might not always be bad people. What is the political structure of your world or mini kingdoms? Do not go too depth into detail with this unless it's the area that they're going to be in, and it is crucially important for them to know that. Just have an idea. Is this going to be a monarchy? Is this a democracy? That kind of stuff is important to kind of think about. Number 4, if there is peace, why? I don't know if you know this, but human beings have a pretty terrible reputation and hard-on for being in fucking wars. There's very few times where we're not constantly fighting in some part of the world. So, if your world has peace, why is there peace? Number 5, what gods and goddesses are there in your world? You can leave this intentionally vague if you wanted to. That's what I did. Or you can say that all of the gods and goddesses have some place in your world. And finally, how is magic treated in your campaign? In different fantasies, magic is kind of looked at in different ways. In some fantasies, magic is something that is very rare and only a few people have it. In some, it's overflowing everywhere. In your campaign, what does it look like? How hard is it to get? How are different magics there? How are they looked at? How are warlocks looked at for making a pact and selling their soul? That kind of stuff. I'll make sure to give you out a handout below and all the questions that I used and the history of the world that I did. All I'm going to say now, my grammar sucks dick. Okay, it is terrible. Please do not judge me on that. As you deliver this information to your players and they start to think about their characters, don't be surprised if they have questions. This could be their first time and they're nervous. It's always okay to say, I'll get back to you on that, or act confidently like me and bullshit your way through it like Rico Suave. As an example, I had one of my players ask me a very unique question about dragonborns and how they're born. He asked, are they born in eggs or are they born like most mammals? I honestly thought both could be a cool description of a character, so I included both of them in there. I said that it depends on what kind of family you're from, if you're born from eggs or if you're born from mammalians. My father used to always say, if you can't wow them with intelligence, baffle them with bullshit. Basically, the moral of the story is try to say yes to as many things as you can and be open to new experiences. Might even find that you enjoy them. This about covers the history of the world. You can add as much as you want, but be careful about ending up in a never-ending hole or writing things that put you in a corner. The second thing you want to do in your session 0 is setting ground rules for your session. I see you there thinking you could just plunge in and out without a thought in the world. But before we get into it, let's hear how you can help support this channel. That's right, folks. This episode is brought to you by you. Those of you who have stopped by the Etsy page and decided that you needed some new toys in your life to make your experiences illustrious and fulfilling, you're the ones who have really helped support this channel, and we really appreciate it. If you're someone out there who is looking to help support the channel, one of the best ways you can go about doing that is by visiting our Etsy page and ordering some of the products that we have on there. And you can find these at etsy.com/shop/swordsandmagicd&D. Thank you. Now, you want to cover two sets of rules when you start talking about your D&D game. First, social rules at the table, and second, allowable material for your game. Social rules at your table is really up to you and the players and something you should really talk about together beforehand. A lot of times things like torture and sexual assault are a good example of non-allowable content depending on what your table talks about. The next thing you want to cover is allowable rules. I recommend for any new DMs, keep it really simple as you can. Player's handbook, no multi-classing, maybe even no feats if you don't want to deal with how those are going to affect the game, so you can kind of learn how the game works. What you allow is totally dependent on what you feel comfortable with and what you feel like you have the skills to handle. You have to consent to this too. Finally, we're at character creation. Just to know, if you stick together as a group, it will probably go slower, but you will be all on the same page. Sometimes new players, though, can feel like they're holding everyone back, and older players might be feeling like it's going too slow. There's 3 basic steps to making a character, and I will probably do future videos for players on how to specifically make different types of characters. But for right now, it kind of works like this. Roll stats. Number 2, filling out all the mechanical stuff associated with your characters. This can be picking your race and class and background and getting all your equipment set up. And then finally, and this is probably the most time consuming, is writing almost like a little autobiography of your own character. For getting your stats to the game, there's a few different options. You can look at taking the standard array. You can look at point buy. The book gives you a fair amount of options. You could roll 46, drop the lowest. One of the things that I like to do just to kind of get people out of the box and start at something new is I like to do roll 46, drop the lowest, but roll them in order. And if your total modifier bonus is less than 5, then you can re-roll them if you want. I think I might have stole this from Matt Colville or seen it from High Rollers, one of those two, and done some variation on it. I like it because it forces old players and new players to play something they might not have been expecting. I also generally provide a 20 question sheet in order to have someone help think about who their character is. This makes it a lot easier for them to fill out a historical autobiography of themselves because they kind of already have an idea of where they're coming from, and these are very directed questions. I will make sure to include this down below. This is the end of a session 0 for me. You should finish, you should feel pleasured, you should feel fulfilled. Between this session and next, I would help get players' backstories fulfilled as well as help getting them to their starting location for session 1. If you go through a session 0 quite quickly, you can jump right into a session 1 if you feel comfortable. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and it offered you a little bit of fucking help. Make sure to click the subscribe button down below and turn on that bell so you can get a little bit more S&M in your life. If you like this type of content, don't hesitate to join our Discord server where you can communicate freely. I hope you guys will continue joining us on more adventuring, and as always, I hope you have a nice fucking day.